Matters.
Trash, dishes.
I don't know what y'all do, but it's not spotting.
I will say this, guys. One of the things whenever you move into a house, and it's your first place and things like that, you start to realize that you're on carpet, if it has carpet, that people have done dubious amounts of washing on the entire time they lived there. And that's one of the reasons why I would highly recommend if you ever buy a house, don't get carpets. Because carpet is revolting. Right down to it.
Why?
Because you can't really get everything out from it.
Yeah, and it's so dirty.
And it's not really meant to stay in houses. It's like it's most people stay there like 10 years and you pull it out. But you know, it's not like people like, for instance, our house, but the carpet's been there since the 70s. So we finally started getting to pull it up. The amount of stuff that was left on the floor, things like that. Pretty gross. So.
On the second floor hallway, there's the hair and the light part where they, like, oh, it's gross.
What's so gross about hair? It's on your hair. It's like red hair. So
Hey!
Oh snap! You just-
Sorry, she just insulted us.
Wait, your hair looks red.
Yeah, you have red hair.
What's wrong with you?
Kylie, yours is more brown.
Because I dyed it.
You know, this is one of those things that I'm like, you know, this is like teaching at an all-girls school because talking about a car, how it's all in place.
Okay, I don't like hair if it's not on my head. Like if it like falls out, I think it's disgusting.
Why don't you
I
think
think
nails
nails
are
are
disgusting? Nails are practically just dead.
Halo, boots,
They are
trucks,
disgusting.
Yeah.
about 90% of it. Paintball.
Not really the.
That hurts. I mean, I do paintball.
I want to try it.
I ran away from all of them because I was so skinny.
Anyways. History. Yes. That's what they're always like, you know, if you want to monetize this account, I'm like,
What's that?
So basically, they have advertisements, you know, things like that. They get a check, people watch it. So it's just kind of like it's a way for people to make money on YouTube accounts. It's kind of like no thanks. Anyways, 1928, the Calgary-on Pact. You guys might recall that in the 14 points, you had this series of things that were trying to end war, including reducing national armaments. That's basically what this was all about, was trying to limit the size of armies by limiting weapons and things like that. So they started melting down ships, started getting rid of weapons. And basically what this meant is the period of 20s and 30s, most of the military in Europe are going to be highly reduced, which is going to lead to a problem because there basically is a lack of preparation for when World War II breaks out. In addition, the 20s and 30s was actually two distinctly different periods in terms of what life was like. In the 20s, the war had just ended, so people were exuberant. We finally have world peace. And more than that, the economy was booming. There was a lot of optimism about what the world was going to be going like. So it was pretty easy to get a pretty good paying job, and there was a lot of new consumer goods available. One of the things that really comes into its own during the 20s is the radio. And you got to imagine, there's no television, there's no internet. What do people do for entertainment? Well, unless they go out, they read, they sew, little projects, listen to radio. And the radio had all these series of programs, just like TV. It's like they had television shows, but all was the sound. Radio program. Now, one thing that was also very popular were movies. And I'm talking the genesis of Hollywood at this point. The types of movies that were coming out started to push the envelope into storytelling and things like that. I mean, this is really the time when movies start to come into their own, as well as the early days of animation. I forget when Snow White came out, but it was crazily early. Like way earlier than you imagine. And in addition to this, there's also news in the movies. There was cartoon shows, things like that. So it was a legitimate ways of being entertained. And this general sense of optimism, as well as a sort of counterculture movement, led to be called the Roaring Twenties. Now, what do I mean by counterculture? You guys know what counterculture? Heard that term before? What does that mean? It's exactly like what it sounds like. Whatever's the culture, we're going against it. So basically, in a nutshell, what your parents like is lame. We're going to do something different. It's pushing the envelope. We're going to do big differences. You know, a great example historically is the 1960s, the Vietnam War, and the hippies. You know, it's kind of cool. In the 1920s, before this, you had this Edwardian styling, it's almost Victorian styling, where dress was very much like formal and like covering a lot of stuff. This was open and free and shorter skirts, and the styling, like the body type that was seen as ideal. You know, in Victorianism and Edwardianism, it was sort of a curvy appearance, you know, this hourglass shape. With the 20s, it was almost like pencil thin. Think of like olive oil from Popeye. And you know, women were like finding new ways of freeing themselves with this idea. Instead of being proper ladies, they're going out drinking and smoking and dancing and having a grand time and all this sorts of stuff. And it's, again, completely opposite of what was acceptable beforehand. And you know, this big movement led a very optimistic era to the 20s. The 30s, however, is when the Depression hits. And we, of course, call it the Great Depression in the United States. And to understand how we get there, we have to understand how the economy works. Are you guys familiar with why we call it a depression? What is a depression? You guys, yeah.
Economic downturn.
Exactly, economic downturn.
Hard to get back on.
Yeah, basically, if you would imagine an economy being graphs, the line graph, you have basically nothing's happening. It's a good time, it's a bad time. And if that bad time continues for long enough, then we have another increase. What does this form shape-wise? A big old hole, otherwise known as a depression. That's why they call it that. So depression is basically an extended period of downward economic progress. Now, what causes the economy to slow down? If you think of it this way, the economy is buying and selling stuff. So if we're not buying or selling stuff, we're in a depression, yeah? Why would people not buy or sell stuff? What causes people not to do that? Sorry? What kind of crisis would do that, do you think? Why not? Like, what would cause them not to be able to get it? Or sure.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry about that. 4, 6, 8. War could do that, yeah. Anything else? Overproduction, yes, can have this issue. Think of it this way. Something that's a little bit dear to us because it's happened about 10 years ago. Overproduction is there's too much of a supply of something. In this case, the housing market. There's too many houses for sale, which means that if you're a buyer, you can get some great deals because all of the sellers are competing with each other for your business. That means prices are going to go down. You with me so far? Okay. That's great for the buyer. However, if this happens for long enough, house prices are going to drop, which means not only is it a problem for people selling their houses, but in addition, anyone who would want to buy a house, it becomes, to some extent, a little bit harder to get money to buy a house. Why has to do with the nature of a foreclosure. Let's talk loans. You want to go to a bank and get a loan. Let's say you want to buy a house. All right? That is a secured loan. It's called a mortgage. What that means by secured is if you can't pay your bills, you cannot pay back the loan, the bank gets to keep the house. That is mitigating the risk of them loaning you money.
Because whenever you loan money, whether you're a person giving a guy $5 or you're a bank, you're incurring risk. And that risk is they might not pay me back. You know what I mean? So how do you mitigate risk? How do you determine whether or not loaning that money to someone is worth it or not?
You give them like, I guess you don't give me the money back, then I get what
You bought with it or something. Yeah, that would be a version of that for a bank. I mean, it doesn't work so much on the individual person because you're probably not going to like, loan them $5, they don't pay you back and go to their house and steal something and pawn it for $5. So that doesn't work on an individual, but you're absolutely right for banks. And you'll see this time and time again with car loans. They do the same thing. They get to keep the car. There are also unsecured loans, like a credit card. And that means that the interest rate tends to be a lot higher because it's a higher risk. Now, in the case of houses aren't selling because there's too many of them on the market, it becomes a bigger risk for the house because let's say they loan money to somebody and they don't pay them back, they take the house. What if they can't sell the house? They are now out all that money. Yes, they have a house that's worth money, but it only is worth money once they sell it. Does that make sense? So it's a huger risk, so they become less likely to loan out money. That slows the whole thing down. If that happens enough, or there's a whole bunch of foreclosures, it causes a panic. And when people start panicking, they don't spend money. Because if I'm afraid that something's going to happen, I'm going to hold as much money on as possible in case something does happen. For instance, if I'm afraid I might lose a job, I'm not going to go spend a whole bunch of money to go buy a house or a car or anything like that because what if I lose my job? I need that savings to survive until I can find a new job. You with me on this? Really what it comes down to is psychology, is optimism. If we have faith in the system, that's what determines whether we have an economic boom or a depression. So what happens here is in the 1930s, we have overproduction of goods that people are not buying. In addition, we have over-speculation. Speculation is basically you trying to figure out whether stocks or bonds or something are going to do well. Now, why you do that is you try to buy stock when it's cheap and sell it whenever it's expensive to make a profit. You with me so far? If you can sell something for more than you had to pay for it, you make money. Okay? Here's the problem. People are buying stock and it's not going anywhere. Or it's losing money. In addition, because people were so optimistic, they're buying stock for more than it's actually going to be worth, and they lose a ton of money. This happens a great deal, and at some point, the stock market collapses. It bottoms out. Every stock goes down. And this causes a huge panic. People start running off the banks to try to take out every dollar they have in the bank so that they can save for it. They can keep it in case of a rainy day. The problem with that, banks don't have a vault with a whole bunch of cash in it. You're aware of this, yes? Any vault they have usually has boxes in it that people can use to basically keep stuffs in. They do have some small amounts of cash, small like being relative, in $30,000, it's a good amount of cash, even hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash, but not enough to cover if every single person in their bank went through their entire life savings. What does a bank do then if everyone wants their money? They got to close. Often, good. This means any money that they had in the bank is gone. Wipes out life savings. There's no Medicare. There's no welfare. There's no Medicaid. There's nothing to keep people safe as a safety net. So this means people's lives are basically ruined. I mean, we're talking guys that are jumping off skyscrapers because their livelihood is gone to the blink of an eye. You have families living together because there's only one house between them. We're talking 50% of the population is without a job. This is in the United States, by the way. Other places like Europe are hit even harder because that's where the most devastation happened in World War I. Germany especially has it bad because on top of all this, they're paying reparations to the United States Great Britain and France. So this situation is pretty awful. And you can see maybe why all these things added together, they would be able to back with somebody like Adolf Hitler. Because one thing Hitler, FDR, and Winston Churchill all have in common is they are great orators. They are able to motivate the people and give them hope. You know, FDR had a thing where he would get on the radio and explain what was going on. Say, I know these are your concerns, and let's address how we're going to solve them. And just people feeling that the government knew what they were going through restored a lot of confidence. Hitler did the same thing. Only instead of saying, let's work together, he said, it's not your fault, it's their fault, in what's called a straw man argument. You set somebody else as the instigator, as the enemy, and basically focus all the hatred towards that group or that person, you know. And you can see this with a lot of dictators today. The way they stay in power is they blame others for all the problems in the country. For instance, North Korea, that's what they've been doing for years. Blame the United States, blame Great Britain, blame France, whoever, blame everybody else. Because if it becomes the people upset with us, there's going to be revolution. So we redirect the blame. So, other world events. In 1922, Ireland gained its independence. And that was its own battle, because before all this happened, Ireland's granted its independence. And England doesn't necessarily say, no, we're not going to grant you your independence, but what they do is say, we're going to push it off to later, That's an unsatisfactory answer, especially a lot of Irish who fought in World War I and died for England. So there's this rabble-rousing. There's not really quite say a revolution, but more like a constant riot. And so to put down this sort of brewing revolution and malcontent, or discontent, they send a new police force that's recruited almost exclusively from veterans of World War I. And these recruits are given sort of a mixed bag uniform of the khaki uniforms of the soldiery, of the army, and the black constable uniforms of police. And so because of that, they get nicknamed the Black and Tans. And basically, these guys aren't necessarily the most stable individuals. I mean, a lot of them have PTSD, they're alcoholics, things like that. And so when the fighting happens, they go way overboard. So it's like there's a riot road, we just kill everyone. A thing like that. Start shooting up until they disperse, that sort of thing. They would burn down homes, rape people, just all kinds of horrid things. And in retaliation, the Irish started fighting back, would shoot police officers, would send car bombs and blow up police stations, things like that. Basically what we call terrorist acts, and begins a flat-out revolution. The Irish win, but not all of Ireland becomes Ireland. Northern Ireland still stays part of Great Britain, and parts of it has to do with there's a cultural difference. For one thing, Northern Ireland is Protestant, Southern Ireland is Catholic. Northern Ireland tends to be mostly sort of identifying with Great Britain, whereas Southern Ireland is Ireland. And so what happens is the Irish Republican Army, or IRA for short, who is fighting this revolution, agreed with Great Britain that yes, this is where the line will be. Then a splinter group comes off from them, calls themselves the True IRA, who refuse to accept any part of Ireland being under British rule, and continue to this day to fight using basically terrorist organizations. They are recognized as a terrorist group throughout the world. That being said, there's still a lot of animosity about this whole thing, which is why it's hugely insensitive when individuals will go to bars on St. Patrick's Day and order drinks called Irish car bombs, which is a thing. There's also a drink called Black and Tan. Nike actually had a shoe that they were selling that was called the Black and Tans, and it was a huge PR nightmare because over there in Ireland especially, but also the rest of Europe, you might as well have called it, the Nazi stormtrooper or the Jew killer, or something like that, equally horribly insensitive. And so that was a clear nightmare. They got rid of it. But that's another piece of history. 1939 was the construction of the Maginot Line. It basically was a series of permanent trenches that were set between the border of France and Germany. And in addition, between 1919 and 1930, there was a growth of fascism, not only in Italy, but also Germany. Benito Mussolini becomes the dictator in Italy, and he does so using fascism, which, to go into detail what that is, let's talk Nazi Germany for a second. Why did they hate the Jews? Sorry?
I thought they were the cause of the war and the depression.
Yep. They blame them for all the problems they're facing Germany. Sure. Why pick the Jews? Yeah.
Hitler wanted to go to an art school, and apparently our teacher must have been a Jew and hated him.
That's a good guess, but actually, no, we don't really have anything quite so cut and dry. Like, for some people are like, he was secretly a Jew, but not really. No, not really. It comes down to psychology for a second. If you have nothing to be proud of, I mean, if you have no accomplishments, what's something you can still be proud of? Race and country. You know, race and nationality. These things, you don't really have to do anything to be a part of. And so it's a way of getting popular support with very little effort. You know what I mean? Using race as a motivator was very easy in Germany because they had nothing else. The economy was collapsed. The government was ineffective. The Weimar Republic was really just kind of an inefficient, unproductive mess. And so this was something that he could use that would give people a feeling, a sense of pride. Fascism is like supernationalism. It's this idea that your race is better than all other races, and other races are just bringing it down, man. For instance, Hitler picked the idea of the Aryan race, that Germans were descended from the Aryans, which to some extent is true. The Aryans originally, historically, were a group in Persia that were unique for having white skin, blonde hair, blue eyes. And they were forced to migrate into Eastern Europe as well as other places. And rumors about that they were supermen. They were stronger than everybody else, they were faster than everybody else, they were smarter than everybody else. But when they moved, they started intermixing with other lesser races, and that caused a lot of these wonderful traits to be lost. And so it was prized to show how Aryan you were. In fact, believe it or not, there was actually a drive to have Aryan people breed with other Aryan people to produce like master babies, strong babies, you know, basically like horse breeding. Like they would pay mothers with Aryan characteristics to have as many children as possible with people who weren't necessarily even their husbands, because it was seen as bettering the German people, things like that. This is basically taking social Darwinism and running with it, you know. So fascism, both in Italy and Germany, and again, really what it comes down to is motivation. This is the Maginot Line. And if you look at the stars, these show areas of fortresses. Otherwise, this line shows fortifications. You can see the border right here. Do you notice what geographic features are near the strongest defenses, the fortresses and things like that? Where are they located? What are they along? Rivers. Remember how we talked about rivers were important defensive positions? We're going to do the same thing here. Now, keep in mind, we're going to talk about the Maginot Line here in a bit, but it is going to be an important thing because they're setting up, they've learned their losses, or their lesson from their losses in World War I. You know, having strong fortifications versus doing small, piddly, or temporary ones, and basically developing the event of something big. Soft science. You guys remember Madame Curie? What did she do?
some radioactivity.
Yes, you did. And radioactivity from the early 20s are going to start changing a great deal of things. From the institutions of early nuclear medicine, such as things like the X-ray, to the eventual development of the atomic bomb, we also have the development of nuclear power. All sorts of new things, beginning what's known as the atomic age. And if you think about it, these things really make our lives a lot better. The ability to see broken bones, to do X-rays and MRIs, CAT scans, all these things which allow us to see into the human body without having to open it up. Furthermore, the potential of nuclear energy is astounding. The ability to power cities using relatively small amounts of fuel. Of course, there are dangers with this, radioactivity being one of them, but it is great potential. As far as warfare is concerned, the nuclear bomb is an interesting thing because it takes a great deal of time, effort, energy, and resources to do a relatively small amount of damage. But the ability to use nuclear power for devastating effects is going to change the world for the next 100 years. Now, let's talk theory of relativity for just a second. 1905, who comes up with the theory of relativity? What scientist? I'm sure you know his name. You've got crazy hair.
Oh, Einstein.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Do you guys know what the theory of relativity is? Well, that's the equation. But what does it have to do with? Speed of light. Specifically, it is a universal constant, universal law. Nothing can go faster than the speed of light. You know why? Why can nothing go faster than the speed of light? Let's talk mass. Does light have mass? It doesn't. Everything else does. So basically, how do you get something that has no mass to go faster than something that has no mass? And the answer is you cannot. Because the amount of energy it would take to get that mass faster than the speed of light, or even as fast as light, takes infinite amounts of energy. Or is infinite, I suppose, should I say. Basically, it doubles. The faster you go, it keeps getting heavier and heavier and heavier. The object physically gets heavier. Which, again, the amount of forces involved are outstanding. Imagine if you were in a spaceship flying and a particle, even just the size of a grain of sand, hit your spaceship going near the speed of light. How much force would it then impart on your spaceship? It would explode your spaceship. There are theories that there are grains of sand out there that would be going so fast they could actually blow up the Earth. However, I've seen the math done, but of course it's not really true. It's called the God particle, I think is what they call it. But it is an interesting mental experiment. And the thing is, this starts to open up all new theories about how the universe works. Theoretical physics. How things function. For one thing, this is one kind of mind-blowing thing, I think, is consider the nature of light in our universe. By the way, if anyone isn't watching Cosmos, this is what this kind of stuff is about. It's fascinating. It's fantastic. I highly recommend it. Let's talk about this. There's a scientist who asked his father on the beach, "Do you believe in ghosts?" He said, "Yes, I do, absolutely." He's like, "I wouldn't believe you said that because his father was a scientist." Well, he says, "No, look up. See the stars. We're not actually seeing stars. We're seeing light that's being reflected from those stars. And the light takes so long to travel that some of those stars are probably burned out, are dead, yet we still see them." Another thing that's really cool, a physical reminder of the speed of light. Go out at night and look at the moon. Again, you're not seeing the moon per se, you're seeing the light reflected from it. How long does it take for that light to hit the surface of the moon, bounce off of it, travel to your eye where you process it as an image? It takes 1 second. So you're looking at the moon 1 second ago. That's how fast light moves. When we talk about the sun, that light we see, that's a week ago. That's a light week. So when you imagine something is 50,000 light years away, how far that really is. It's like, right?
We're seeing the sun in a week ago.
Yeah. So the sun could be burned out right now, we wouldn't know.
What?
It's unlikely. But
How so?
Right, make my brain.
So we're not really looking at the sun. We're looking in the
at light.
light.
Because all of our sight is based on light.
So, like, if we didn't see the sun, we just wouldn't see it. Wait, hold on.
Well, the really cool thing is we have other ways to look at stuff in light, don't we? Such as gamma radiation. We can see ultraviolet light. It's all types of different types of things.
Wait, so the sun,
Yes.
like the sun, it takes a week to travel down to our,
Correct.
but then how come the moon only takes a second?
It's much closer. Now, technically, if you want to be like really precise, it depends on how far the moon is from the sun at time as it goes around our revolution. Same thing as the sun; it's going to be closer at times in our elliptical revolution. But this is on average.
Dude, that's weird.
The thing that really makes you giggle is the fact that time and space are one thing.
What?
That's why they call it time space or space time.
What?
I don't think go with the stars and stuff.
Oh, this is getting into other types of things, but yeah. Yes.
So you said that light basically like does I get that with like you see colors because the light from my sock.
Sure.
So technically, if we had no light, we would literally be living in like eternal darkness. Like we wouldn't be able to see it.
Well, theoretically, of course, the other thing is keep in mind radiation is another way we can see things. And there's all kinds of different types of things. The universe is constantly evolving. That's one of the things that's outstanding about it. If you think about it, it's if you peel back all the layers, like if you go out and look at the night sky, you're not seeing so many stars because of all the cloud cover and smog and all kinds of pollutants in the air. If you peel all that back, suddenly you realize how much light there really is out there. You know? So it's an amazing thing. I think it's episode 3 of Cosmos. It's called The Universe of Light. It's just kind of like fascinating. I highly recommend it. And one thing I will say is I am not a scientist, not at least to this way. Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's probably one of the greatest science teachers I've ever seen because he takes theoretical physics, like that crazy nonsense they talk about a Big Bang Theory, and makes it like, explain it like I'm 5. Like that's really cool. Yeah.
Oh, he said that like a sun could have like exploded back when like Jesus was alive, and now it's just getting here and it's a star.
True story. Oh, something that'll really bake your noodle is the way that gravity works. You know, we often think of a black hole as being just basically a like place where you go and you're crushed into nothingness. That's not how gravity actually works. That's how time and space work. Like theoretically, if you could pass the event horizon and survive it, you might find yourself in another universe. And like they were talking about how this is all possible in this episode, and they go, "You want to know what it looks like inside a black hole? Look around you. This might be it." You're just kind of like, "We might be in a black hole." Boom! You know, there goes my brain.
Wait, where's the black hole?
We don't know what we are because we couldn't see it because nothing can escape the event horizon. But it is theoretically possible, and that's what's so.
So we could be in a black hole.
Yeah, there are universes that are the size of a grain of sand. Just kind of what? That's why I think that the thing in Men in Black at the very end of the first movie where they got those marbles, it's like that could be real. Anyways, but this is what I was talking about in terms of differences in clothing, things like that. And again, very, very different mentality. Here's another picture of the differences. I actually showed this to you guys at a time. But again, out there smoking and drinking and dancing, doing all these different kind of crazy things. And, you know, what's funny about it is I think we can understand how culture changes pretty easily by looking at what's changing now. Consider this. How many of you all would be okay with asking out a guy? Like, ask a guy out. Okay? Some of you and some of you not. What about ask them to marry you.
That is a man's job.
Why?
That is.
It's tradition. It's tradition.
It's okay. Let's analyze it for a second. It's tradition, just another way of saying it's part of our culture. Fair enough. But every aspect of our culture is mental. None of it is written in stone somewhere that we must do this. It's not biological. It's something that we have created. For instance, the idea that women are weak and insecure and need the support of a man.
That is the exact opposite way, by the way.
My point is that it's all imaginative. People are people. There are people who need more support than others. This is just who they are. It's regardless of their gender. But yet, we physically alter ourselves to reflect the ideology that we create. Happy birthday, guys.
It's Sarah.
Do I need to mark that?